They say the most dangerous person in the room is the one who listens while everyone else is talking. Marcus Bennett thought he was the king of the world. He was the VP of Sales Untouchable and arrogant enough to bring his mistress Sienna into the most important merger meeting of the decade, posing as his assistant. He expected the new owner of the company to be some old clueless billionaire he could easily manipulate. But when the boardroom doors swung open, Marcus didn't see a stranger. He saw the woman he had ignored for years, the woman he kissed goodbye that morning. The new CEO was his wife, Clara. And she wasn't there to negotiate, she was there to burn his world to the ground. The morning of November 14th started with a silence that should have been a warning. Marcus Bennett stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom of his penthouse in Seattle, adjusting the Windsor knot of his silk tie. It was a Brioni deep crimson, the kind of tie that screamed power. At 42, Marcus was the picture of corporate success, silvering temples, a jawline that seemed carved from granite, and a tailor who knew exactly how to hide the slight softening of his midsection. Behind him, sitting on the edge of the king-sized bed, was Clara. Clara Bennett looked nothing like the women Marcus spent his evenings with. She was 38, but dressed like she was 50, usually in beige cardigans and sensible slacks. She was reading a book, her glasses perched on the end of her nose. To Marcus, she was part of the furniture, reliable, necessary for the image of a stable home life, but utterly unexciting. "You're leaving early," Clara said, not looking up from her book. Her voice was calm, flat. "Big day, Clara. I've told you this," Marcus replied, grabbing his Rolex from the dresser. "The acquisition meeting. Stratford Holdings is officially buying out the company today. If I play my cards right with the new ownership, I'm looking at a promotion to global director." Clara turned a page. "Stratford Holdings. That's the venture capital firm from London, isn't it?" Marcus scoffed a short, sharp sound. "I'm surprised you remember that." "Yes. Nobody knows who the head of the snake is, yet they operate through proxies. But I intend to be the first one to shake his hand. I need to secure my territory before the other VPs try to circle the wagons." He finally turned to look at her. "I'll be late tonight. Dinner with the new board. Don't wait up." Clara finally looked up. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, looked strangely dark in the morning light. She stared at him for a beat too long. "Make sure you wear the cufflinks I gave you, the silver ones with the crest." "The old things. They're a bit dated, Clara." "They bring good luck," she said softly. "And I have a feeling you're going to need luck today, Marcus." He rolled his eyes but grabbed the cufflinks from the velvet box just to shut her up. He didn't notice the faint, ghost-like smile that played on her lips as he walked out the door without kissing her goodbye. He didn't see her pick up her phone the second the heavy oak door clicked shut. He didn't hear her say, "He's on his way. Initiate phase 2. Marcus's mood shifted the moment he stepped into the elevator. The stifling domestic atmosphere was gone, replaced by the adrenaline of the kill. He texted her. Sienna Vale. 26 years old, sharp as a tack and hungry. She had started as an intern in marketing 2 years ago, and Marcus had mentored her right into his bed. Unlike Clara, Sienna was vibrant, loud, and validated Marcus's ego at every turn. Today he was taking a massive risk. He was bringing Sienna to the transition meeting as his executive assistant. His actual assistant, Mrs. Higgins, had conveniently come down with a sudden case of food poisoning yesterday, a little chaotic orchestration on Marcus's part involving a very expensive gift basket sent to her home. He pulled his Porsche Panamera up to the curb, and Sienna hopped in. She looked stunning, The navy dress was professional enough to pass HR standards, but tight enough to make men stumble over their words. "God, you look incredible," Marcus said, putting a hand on her thigh as he merged into traffic. "Are you sure about this?" "Marcus," Sienna asked, her voice laced with a mix of excitement and nerves. "The new owners. What if they ask why Mrs. Higgins isn't there?" "Relax," Marcus laughed. "These venture capital guys don't know who Mrs. Higgins is. They don't know anything about the day-to-day. They're just money men. I'm the one with the client list. I'm the one who drives revenue. I could bring a golden retriever in there and call it my chief of staff, and they'd nod along as the stock price is up." Sienna giggled, relaxing into the leather seat. "You're bad. I'm essential," he corrected. "And after today, when I secure that global director spot, we won't have to hide as much. I'm going to start moving assets around. The divorce will be messy, but with the bonus I'm getting, I'll be able to buy Clara off." "You promise?" Sienna asked, the vulnerability slipping through. "I promise. She's boring. She's old news, and frankly, she holds me back. You and I, Sienna, we're the future." They arrived at the Obsidian Tower, a 70-story monolith of glass and steel in the financial district. The meeting was scheduled for the 60th floor, the Sky Conference Suite. As they walked through the marble lobby, the tension in the air was palpable. Employees were huddled in corners whispering. Acquisitions were terrifying for the lower-level staff. It usually meant layoffs. But for men like Marcus, chaos was a ladder. "Keep your head up," Marcus whispered to Sienna. "Walk like you own the place. Take notes, look serious, and pour the water. Leave the talking to me." "Got it, boss." She winked. They reached the elevators. Just as the doors were closing, a hand jammed between them. The doors bounced back, revealing David Sterling, the CFO. David looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His tie was slightly crooked, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. "Marcus," David breathed, stepping in. He nodded nervously at Sienna. "Ms. Vale." "David," Marcus said smoothly. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Pull it together. We need to present a united front to Stratford Holdings." David pressed the button for the 60th floor, his hand shaking slightly. "You don't understand, Marcus. I was looking into the Stratford filings last night. Deep dive due diligence." And Marcus checked his watch. "They have capital. That's all that matters." "No," David hissed, lowering his voice. "I couldn't find the primary shareholder. It's buried under shell companies, a trust within a holding company, within a foundation. It's a ghost ship. But I found a signatory on one of the early documents from 3 years ago. A pseudonym. So billionaires love privacy. The pseudonym was Nemesis." David swallowed hard. "Who buys a logistics tech company and calls themselves Nemesis? Someone who isn't doing this for profit, Marcus. Someone who is doing this for blood." Marcus laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the small metal box. "You're reading too many spy novels, David. It's probably some 20-year-old crypto kid thinking he's edgy. Relax. I've prepared the Q3 projections. Once they see the numbers, they won't care if their name is Nemesis or Mickey Mouse." The elevator dinged. Floor 60. "Showtime," Marcus said, adjusting his cuffs, the silver ones Clara had given him. He felt a sudden sharp prick of annoyance that he was actually wearing them, but he shook it off. They stepped out into the foyer of the conference suite. The view was breathtaking, overlooking the entire city, but the room felt cold. The air conditioning was cranked up high. Around the massive mahogany table sat the other key players, the VP of Operations, the head of HR, and the legal counsel. They all looked tense. At the head of the table, the chair was empty. Beside the empty chair stood a woman in a sharp grey suit, holding a tablet. She was severe-looking, with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Please take your seats," the woman said. Her accent was British, clipped and precise. "The CEO will be with you momentarily." Marcus pulled out a chair for Sienna, positioning her to his right, before sitting down himself. He leaned back, spreading his arms, asserting dominance over the nervous room. "So," Marcus addressed the British woman, "does the new boss have a name, or should we just bow to the empty chair?" The woman didn't smile. "The CEO is wrapping up a call regarding the immediate restructuring of the executive board. She prefers to address you all at once." "She?" Marcus raised an eyebrow at Sienna. "A woman," he mouthed. "Better. He knew how to charm women. He had built a career on it." He winked at Sienna, who was dutifully opening her notebook. "Restructuring?" David asked, his voice cracking. "We were told this was a transition meeting, not a restructuring." "Things change," the woman said coldly. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the far end of the room clicked. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Every head turned. Marcus put on his best winning smile, the one that had closed million-dollar deals, the one that had seduced Sienna, the one that hid 1,000 lies. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, ready to stride forward and shake the hand of the woman who now owned his career. "Let's make a good impression," he muttered to Sienna. The doors swung open. First came the sound of heels. Click, click, click. Slow, deliberate, authoritative. Then a figure stepped into the light. She was wearing a white power suit that cost more than Marcus's car. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun at home, was blown out in sleek chestnut waves that cascaded over her shoulders. She wore stiletto heels that added 3 inches to her height, making her loom like a statue of judgment. Marcus's smile froze. His brain short-circuited. He blinked, assuming it was a hallucination caused by stress. He looked at the face. He knew that face. He knew the curve of that jaw, the shape of those eyes. But he had never seen this expression on it. This wasn't the look of a woman who knitted while watching TV. This was the look of a predator spotting a wounded animal. The woman walked to the head of the table. She didn't look at the board members. She didn't look at Sienna. She looked straight at Marcus. She placed a single folder on the mahogany table. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said. Her voice was the same one that had asked him about his cufflinks 2 hours ago, but now it had steel in it. "I am the majority shareholder of Stratford Holdings. My name is Clara Sterling Bennett. But for the purposes of this meeting, you can call me Madam CEO." Marcus's knees gave out. He collapsed back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. Beside him, Sienna dropped her pen. "Clara." Marcus whispered the name, strangling him. What are you doing here?" Clara slowly turned her head toward him, her eyes icy. She offered a small, terrifying smile. "I'm here to clean house, Marcus, and I think I'll start with the trash." The silence in the Sky Conference suite was absolute. It wasn't the quiet of a library. It was the vacuum of space, sucking the oxygen out of Marcus Bennett's lungs. He looked at the woman at the head of the table. He saw the faint scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident, a story she had told him on their second date. He saw the ring on her finger, not the engagement ring he had bought her, but a heavy platinum signet ring with a crest he didn't recognize. "Clara?" Marcus asked. Again, his voice, cracking into a nervous, high-pitched laugh. He stood up halfway, his instincts screaming at him to regain control of the room. Okay. Very funny. Is this an anniversary surprise? Did you rent out the floor? I didn't realize you knew the building security codes." He turned to the other board members, spreading his hands. "Gentlemen, my wife has a unique sense of humor. Clara, honey, you look beautiful, but we are in the middle of a multi-million-dollar acquisition. You need to head home. I'll take you out for dinner later, anywhere you want. Le Bernardin. We'll go to New York." Clara didn't blink. She didn't smile. She didn't even look at him as a husband. She looked at him as a liability on a balance sheet. "Sit down, Mr. Bennet," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that slammed Marcus back into his chair. And addressing the chair without permission is a violation of boardroom protocol. Strike one. "The chair," Marcus sputtered. "Clara, stop playing." "Ms. Archer," Clara said, nodding to the severe British woman standing beside her. "Please clarify the ownership structure for the board." Ms. Archer stepped forward, tapping her tablet. A holographic projection lit up the center of the mahogany table. It showed a complex web of corporations. At the top, sitting like a crown, was Stratford Holdings. Stratford Holdings, Ms. Archer recited, is the family trust of the Sterling dynasty. The sole heir to the Sterling estate, following the passing of her grandfather, Arthur Sterling, 3 years ago, is Clara Sterling Bennet. The name hit the room like a physical blow. David Sterling, the CFO, let out a whimper. Sterling, Arthur Sterling, the shipping magnate, I thought. I thought that was a different branch. Clara turned her gaze to David. Distant cousins, David. But yes, my grandfather was a man who believed in privacy. He believed that wealth should be quiet. When I married Marcus, I respected my grandfather's wishes. I kept my maiden name off the marriage certificate. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the billions attached to my signature. She looked back at Marcus. Her eyes were voids. I wanted to know that my husband was building a life with me, not my portfolio. For 15 years I played the part of the supportive, simple wife. I cooked your meals. I washed your clothes. I listened to you brag about your empire while I quietly managed a global conglomerate from my laptop in the den while you were asleep. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The boring woman, the woman he ignored, the woman he cheated on. She was worth more than this entire company. She could buy him and sell him for scrap metal. But, Clara continued, leaning forward, clasping her hands, it seems my experiment in humility has failed. I have watched you, Marcus. I have watched you cut corners. I have watched you belittle your staff. And recently, I have watched you make very poor hiring decisions. Clara's eyes shifted sharp as daggers to Sienna. Sienna was trembling. She had shrunk into her chair, trying to make herself invisible. The power outfit she wore now looked cheap and costume-like compared to Clara's bespoke tailoring. "And who is this?" Clara asked, feigning ignorance. "The manifest lists a Mrs. Higgins as your executive assistant. This does not look like Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins is 60 years old and has a penchant for knitting cat sweaters." Marcus opened his mouth to lie, but his throat was dry. Mrs. Higgins is ill. This is Sienna Vale. She's stepping in." "Stepping in," Clara repeated, tasting the words. "I see. Miss Vale, from the marketing department, correct?" Sienna nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Ma'am." "Mrs. Bennet Sterling," Clara corrected. "Or Madam CEO. Tell me, Miss Vale, you are here to assist the VP of Sales in a high-level merger meeting. Do you have the NDA clearance? Do you have the security protocols? Do you even have a notepad?" Sienna looked down at her empty hands. She had dropped her pen earlier. I was just told to come along." Sienna stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at Marcus for help, but Marcus was staring at the table, refusing to meet her gaze. "Marcus told you to come along," Clara said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Interesting. Usually assistants are chosen for their competence. But looking at your personnel file..." Clara tapped the tablet, and a new file projected onto the table. It was Sienna's performance review. Missed deadlines, inappropriate office conduct, and yet 3 raises in 6 months, all authorized by Marcus Bennett. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. The legal counsel began furiously taking notes. This was a lawsuit waiting to happen. "It looks to me," Clara said, her voice hardening, "that you aren't here for your administrative skills, Ms. Vale. You are here because my husband treats this company like his personal dating service." "That's not true," Marcus snapped, finally finding his voice. "She's a promising talent. I was mentoring her." "Mentoring?" Clara deadpanned. "Is that what we're calling it? I suppose the dinner receipts from the Sapphire Room last Thursday were mentoring sessions. 2 lobster tails and a bottle of Dom Perignon charged to the company card. I saw the expense report this morning." "Marcus, you listed it as Client Entertainment Stratford Holdings." The room gasped. "You charged a date with your mistress to the company buying you?" Clara asked, an eyebrow raised. "To my company?" Marcus turned purple. I was doing due diligence. I was preparing strategies." "You were stealing," Clara said simply. "But we'll get to the embezzlement later. Right now, I have a boardroom to run. Ms. Vale, you are dismissed." Sienna looked up, hope flashing in her eyes. I can go." "You can go," Clara said. "But not back to your desk. Security is waiting in the lobby with a box containing your personal effects. Your employment is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct and unauthorized access to executive meetings." "What?" Sienna shrieked, standing up. "You can't do that, Marcus." She grabbed Marcus's arm. "Marcus, do something. Tell her." Marcus pulled his arm away roughly. He knew the ship was sinking, and he wasn't going to let Sienna drag him down faster. "Sienna, just go. We'll talk later." Sienna looked at him, realized he was throwing her to the wolves, and her face twisted in rage. "You coward! You told me she was a frumpy housewife. You told me she was stupid. Get out!" Marcus roared. The double doors opened, and 2 large security guards stepped in. They flanked Sienna. As she was escorted out, sobbing and cursing, the room fell into a heavy, terrifying silence again. Clara didn't watch her leave. She kept her eyes on Marcus. "Now that the distractions are gone," Clara said, opening the folder she had placed on the table. "Let's look at the real reason I'm here. The Q3 sales projections." Marcus felt a cold sweat break out on his back. The Q3 numbers. He had cooked them. He had inflated the projected revenue by 30% to boost the stock price before the acquisition, banking on the fact that the new owners wouldn't look too closely until the deal was signed. He planned to find the discrepancy later and blame it on market volatility. But the new owner wasn't a stranger. It was the woman who balanced his checkbook. "Marcus," Clara said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Why don't you walk the board through the Asian market expansion figures, specifically the contract with the Shenzhen Logistics Group?" Marcus swallowed. The Shenzhen deal. It's solid. We're in final talks." "Final talks?" Clara pulled a piece of paper from her folder. "That's strange, because I had breakfast with the CEO of Shenzhen Logistics yesterday. He's an old friend of my grandfather. He told me he's never heard of you. He's never spoken to you. And he certainly hasn't signed a $20 million contract." She slid the paper down the long mahogany table. It stopped perfectly in front of Marcus. It was an affidavit from the Shenzhen CEO stating that the contract Marcus had entered into the company records was a forgery. "Fraud," the legal counsel whispered, looking at Marcus with horror. That's federal securities fraud. Marcus looked around the room. The faces of his colleagues, people he had bullied, manipulated, and outmaneuvered for years, were now looking at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. Clara. Marcus pleaded, his voice trembling. Let's talk about this in private. Please, we're husband and wife. You can't do this to me in front of them. Clara stood up slowly. She walked around the table until she was standing directly behind him. She leaned down her lips close to his ear. The scent of her perfume, a scent he realized he hadn't smelled in years because he was never close enough filling his senses. Husband and wife, she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Marcus, you stopped being my husband the moment you walked into this building with that girl on your arm. Right now, I'm not your wife. I'm the executioner. She straightened up and looked at the terrified board members. Lock the doors, Clara commanded the security guards. Nobody leaves until we audit every single account Marcus Bennett has touched in the last 5 years. She walked back to the head of the table and sat down, crossing her legs. Get comfortable, gentlemen, she said, opening a fresh file. It's going to be a long day. And Marcus, stop sweating. It ruins the Italian silk. I paid for that suit after all. 3 hours had passed, and the boardroom of the Obsidian Tower had transformed from a place of corporate power into a high-stakes interrogation cell. The pristine mahogany table was now littered with empty water bottles, half-eaten sandwiches that no one had the appetite to finish, and stacks of printed spreadsheets that smelled of fresh ink and doom. Marcus Bennett sat alone on one side of the table. His jacket was off, draped over the chair like a discarded skin. His tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone, revealing a neck flushed with stress. He watched as a team of 3 forensic accountants brought in by Clara worked silently at a side station. They were like vultures picking at a carcass, their keystrokes the only sound in the room. Clara sat at the head of the table sipping tea. She hadn't broken a sweat. She watched the accountants with the patience of a spider that had already spun its web. We found it, said the lead auditor, a man named Mr. Chen. He didn't look up from his screen. It was buried deep in the vendor list under consulting fees, but the routing numbers don't match any legitimate firm. Marcus felt his heart hammer against his ribs. The Vector account. Project Vector, Clara said, her voice cutting through the stale air. Marcus, would you like to explain to the board what Project Vector is, or should Mr. Chen tell us? Marcus cleared his throat. It sounded like sandpaper. It's a discretionary fund for off-the-books client acquisition. Sometimes you need cash to wine and dine clients in ways that don't look good on a standard expense report. It's industry standard, Clara. You'd know that if you ever worked a day in sales. He tried to inject a note of condescension, a last-ditch attempt to reassert his dominance, but it fell flat. Client acquisition, Clara repeated. She stood up and walked over to the auditors. She picked up a printout and read it aloud. November 3rd, $15,000 withdrawal. Location, the Velvet Room, Macau. October 15th, $22,000 withdrawal. Location, an online transfer to a shell entity in the Cayman Islands known as Red Chip Holdings. David Sterling, the CFO, gasped. Red Chip. That's an online high-stakes poker syndicate. We blocked their IP addresses from the company server 2 years ago. Clara dropped the paper in front of Marcus. You weren't courting clients, Marcus. You were covering your losses. You've been bleeding this company dry to feed a gambling addiction that you've managed to hide from everyone. Everyone except me. Marcus gripped the edge of the table. You can't prove that's me. Anyone could have accessed those accounts. Mrs. Higgins had my passwords. It could have been hacked. Stop, Clara said, her voice sharp. Don't insult my intelligence. We traced the login IPs. They match your cell phone. They match the Wi-Fi at our penthouse. They even match the IP address of the hotel in Cabo where you claimed you were at a logistics conference last month. You were actually at a blackjack tournament, weren't you? Marcus stayed silent. The room seemed to shrink. The walls were closing in. "Here is the reality," Clara said, pacing slowly around him. "You stole $1.2 million from this company over 18 months. In the corporate world, that's embezzlement. In the legal world, that's 10 to 15 years in a federal prison." She leaned in close. "But that's not the worst part, is it?" "Marcus, the worst part is who you borrowed the money from before you stole it from us." Marcus froze. His eyes went wide. This was the secret he was truly terrified of. The gambling was bad, but the people he owed, they didn't sue. They broke legs. "I found a promissory note in your digital trash bin," Clara whispered. "You owe $500,000 to the Petrovich brothers. Loan sharks, Marcus, really. You risked our safety, my safety, by getting into bed with the Russian mob." "I had it under control," Marcus hissed, his voice trembling with genuine terror. "I was going to pay them back with the bonus from the merger. That's why I needed this deal to go through. If I don't pay them by Friday, they... Clara, you have to help me. They know where we live." Clara straightened up, looking down at him with cold detachment. "They know where you live. I moved out this morning. My security team has already swept the penthouse and relocated my belongings to a secure facility. You left me?" Marcus stared at her, the reality of his isolation sinking in. "I left you a long time ago," Clara said. "I just waited until today to make it official." She turned to Mr. Chen. "Pack up the evidence. We have enough for the police." "Police!" Marcus shot up from his chair. "No, Clara, please. If I go to jail, I can't pay Petrovich. They'll have me killed inside. You're sentencing me to death." "You sentenced yourself," Clara said, turning her back on him. "But before the police get here, there is one more loose end we need to tie up. You blamed your assistant, Mrs. Higgins, for the account access. You claimed she was the one handling the transfers." "She was..." Marcus shouted, grasping at the lie like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. "She's senile. She makes mistakes. I can pin it on her negligence. We can say she was confused. Clara, don't destroy me. Blame the secretary. It's what everyone does." Clara stopped. She looked at the double doors. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. "You really are a cliché, Marcus, always blaming the woman in the background. But you forgot one thing about people who live in the background." Clara snapped her fingers. "They see everything." The double doors swung open for the second time that day. Marcus expected to see the police. He expected to see handcuffs. Instead, he saw a wheelchair. Pushing the wheelchair was a burly security guard. Sitting in it, looking frail and wrapped in a thick shawl, was Mrs. Higgins. But as she was wheeled into the center of the room, she sat up straighter. She pulled the shawl off her shoulders. She wasn't frail. She was furious. Mrs. Higgins was 62, a grandmother of 4, and she had been Marcus's punching bag for 5 years. He had made her fetch his dry-cleaning lie to his wife and cover up his affairs. He called her the dinosaur behind her back. "Hello, Mr. Bennett," Mrs. Higgins said. Her voice was steady, clearer than he had heard it in years. "Mrs. Higgins," Marcus stammered. You're sick. You have food poisoning. I sent you a basket." "Yes," Mrs. Higgins said, reaching into her oversized handbag. She pulled out a jar of artisanal jam from the basket Marcus had sent. Arsenic-laced jam. "No, I'm joking. It was just expired. But the note you included was very interesting." She pulled out a small card. "Take the week off. Don't check your email. Enjoy the silence. You wanted me gone so you could bring that girl Sienna in here. I was giving you a break, Marcus lied. Shut up, Marcus, Clara said calmly. Mrs. Higgins isn't here to discuss fruit baskets. She's here to discuss the Vector account. Mrs. Higgins looked at the board of directors. Mr. Bennett thinks I'm a technophobe because I prefer paper calendars. He thinks because I'm older, I don't understand how the digital cloud works. She smirked. But my grandson is a cybersecurity analyst for the Navy. He taught me a few things. She pulled a USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table to David Sterling. What is this? David asked. That, Mrs. Higgins said, locking eyes with Marcus, is a mirror of every keystroke Mr. Bennett has made on his office computer for the last 6 months. Keylogger software. I installed it the day he threw a stapler at me for bringing him the wrong coffee. Marcus went white. A keylogger. She had everything. The passwords, the emails to the loan sharks, the love letters to Sienna, the fake invoices. Everything. I saw him moving the money. Mrs. Higgins continued addressing Clara. I saw him cooking the Q3 books. I saw him forging the Shenzhen contract. I didn't know who to tell. If I went to HR, he would have fired me. He controls HR. So she came to me, Clara interjected. 3 months ago. Mrs. Higgins found my personal email, the one connected to the Sterling Trust. She was the one who told me what my husband was really doing at work. Marcus looked from Clara to Mrs. Higgins, the two women he had underestimated the most, the boring wife and the old secretary. They had been conspiring against him, right under his nose. You. Marcus pointed a shaking finger at Mrs. Higgins. You were spying on me. I'm your boss. You were a tyrant, Mrs. Higgins corrected. And you were stealing from the company that pays my pension. I wasn't going to let you bankrupt us so you could play poker and sleep with interns. Clara walked over and placed a hand on Mrs. Higgins's shoulder. Thank you, Martha. You've saved this company. Just doing my job, Ma'am, Mrs. Higgins said, giving Marcus a look of pure vindication. Clara turned back to Marcus. The game is over. We have the forensic accounting. We have the key logs. We have the testimony of your staff. And we have the confession of your mistress. Yes, Sienna is currently in the lobby giving a very detailed statement to legal in exchange for avoiding a lawsuit. Marcus slumped into his chair. He looked small. The granite jawline seemed to dissolve into jowls. The expensive suit looked like a costume he had outgrown. What happens now? He whispered. Now. Clara checked her watch. Now I believe the SEC is arriving in the lobby. David, escort Mr. Bennett down to meet them. Make sure he uses the service elevator. We wouldn't want him to upset the clients in the main hall. 2 security guards stepped forward, hoisting Marcus up by his arms. He didn't fight. He was too broken to fight. As they dragged him toward the door, he looked back at Clara one last time. Clara, he choked out. I loved you. In my own way. Clara didn't look up from the file she was reading. Goodbye, Marcus. Don't forget to return the cufflinks. They're family heirlooms. The doors closed behind him, leaving a heavy silence in the room. David Sterling exhaled a long breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. My God, that was intense. Madam CEO, what do we do about the merger? Stratford Holdings won't want to buy us now. The scandal. Clara finally sat down at the head of the table. She looked at the terrified faces of the remaining board members. She looked at the empty chair where her husband had sat. The merger is already done, David. Clara said, her voice cool and commanding. Stratford Holdings isn't pulling out. Because I am Stratford Holdings, and I intend to rebuild this company. But first, she picked up the phone on the conference table. Get me the legal department, she ordered. and get me a divorce lawyer, the best one in the country. I want to make sure that when Marcus gets out of prison, the only thing he owns is the lint in his pocket." She hung up and looked out the window at the city skyline. She had burned her life down to the ground today. But as she watched the sun glinting off the glass towers, Clara didn't feel sadness. She felt free. 6 months had passed since the doors of the Obsidian Tower closed on Marcus Bennett's career. The fall was not a graceful descent. It was a car crash played out in slow motion on every major news network. The media dubbed it the Billionaire's husband scandal. Overnight, Marcus went from being a respected executive to a punchline on late-night talk shows. The trial took place in the dreary, fluorescent-lit expanse of the Federal District Court of Western Washington. It was raining a relentless gray Seattle drizzle that seemed to seep into the courtroom walls. Marcus sat at the defendant's table. He looked 20 years older. His hair, once dyed a rich chestnut, was now growing out in patchy grey clumps. He had lost 30 pounds. The Italian suits were gone, replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting blazer his public defender had brought him from a thrift store. His assets had been frozen by the SEC and Clara's lawyers within hours of his arrest, leaving him unable to afford a private attorney. On the witness stand sat Sienna Vale. She looked different, too. She was dressed demurely, in a high-collared black dress, wearing glasses. She didn't need playing the part of the naive victim to perfection. She had cut a deal with the prosecution, full immunity, in exchange for testifying against Marcus regarding the falsified accounts and the embezzlement. "He told me it was standard procedure," Sienna said, wiping a fake tear from her cheek. Her voice trembled just the right amount. "He told me that as the VP he had discretion to move funds. I was just an intern when we met. I looked up to him. He was a mentor. I didn't know I was helping him steal." Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "Liar," he whispered. "You helped me spend it. You chose the hotels. Order." Judge Holloway banged the gavel, glaring at Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, one more outburst and I will have you gagged." Marcus slumped back. He looked into the gallery. It was packed with reporters, former colleagues who had come to gloat, and curious onlookers. But in the front row, sitting with a posture so straight it looked painful, was Clara. She wore black, but not in mourning. It was a chic, sharp black coat. She looked like a widow who had killed her husband and was already spending the insurance money. She met his gaze with zero emotion. No anger, no pity. Just a blank, terrifying indifference. The trial dragged on for 3 weeks. The evidence was insurmountable. Mrs. Higgins's key logs showed every transfer. The testimony from the Shenzhen CEO proved the fraud. But the final nail in the coffin was the Petrovich connection. The prosecution painted Marcus not just as a thief, but as a dangerous liability who had exposed a publicly traded company to organized crime elements. When the jury returned, they didn't even look at him. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman read. "Wire fraud, embezzlement, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering." Judge Holloway didn't hesitate. "Marcus Bennett, you have shown a profound lack of remorse. You abused your position of power, you betrayed your fiduciary duties, and you exploited your subordinates. I sentence you to 12 years in a federal correctional facility with no eligibility for parole for the first 10. 12 years. Marcus felt the world spin. 12 years meant he would be 54 when he got out. His life was over. As the bailiff moved to cuff him, Marcus's public defender leaned in. "There's one more thing, Marcus. Your wife's lawyers are here. They want you to sign the divorce settlement before you're transported to FCI Sheridan. Now, Marcus asked, dazed. Here. They have a notary in the holding cell. 10 minutes later, in a small concrete room behind the courtroom, Marcus sat across from a woman he barely recognized. Clara sat on a metal folding chair, a stack of documents between them. "Sign," Clara said, pushing a pen toward him. Marcus looked at the papers. It was a total capitulation. He was giving up claim to the penthouse, the cars, the joint accounts, even his 401k. "Clara," Marcus rasped, "I have nothing. If I sign this, I come out of prison a beggar." "You are a beggar, Marcus," Clara said coldly. "But if you don't sign, I will drag this divorce out for the next 10 years. I will use my resources to ensure that every penny you might make in the future book, deals, interviews, consulting, goes directly to me for emotional damages. Sign it and I let you keep your dignity. Don't sign it and I will sue you until you can't even afford a tombstone." Marcus looked at her eyes. He saw the immense power behind them. He realized he had been sleeping next to a dragon for 15 years, thinking she was a house cat. He signed. "Good," Clara said, taking the papers. She stood up to leave. "Clara," Marcus said, his voice trembling with a new fear. The Petrovic brothers, the Russians, I still owe them. Now that I'm going to prison, they'll know I can't pay. They have contacts inside. I'm a dead man walking. You have to help me. Please, pay them off. It's chump change to you." Clara paused at the heavy steel door. She didn't look back. "Good luck, Marcus." The door clanged shut, leaving him alone, with the echo of his own breathing and the crushing realization that the worst was yet to come. Federal Correctional Institution. Sheridan was a medium-security nightmare. It wasn't the violent hellscape of the movies, but it was a grey, monotonous purgatory designed to strip a man of his soul. Marcus had been inside for 3 months. He kept his head down. He worked in the laundry detail folding sheets for 8 cents an hour. He didn't speak to anyone unless he had to. Every night he lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, waiting. He knew how the Petrovich brothers worked. They didn't rush. They let the fear marinate. They would wait until he felt safe, until he let his guard down. Then a shank in the shower or a slip on the stairs. He checked his food for glass. He slept with one eye open. The stress was eating him alive faster than the prison food. He had tried to contact the outside world, but nobody answered. Sienna had changed her number. His old friends from the country club had blocked him. Even his parents, humiliated by the shame he brought on the family name, had stopped accepting his collect calls. Then on a Tuesday in March, a guard tapped his cell bars. "Bennett. Legal visit." Marcus sat up, his heart pounding. "Legal, I don't have a lawyer." "Suit says he's here for you. Move it." Marcus was marched down the linoleum hallway to the visitation room. He was sat in a booth with a glass partition. On the other side wasn't a public defender. It was a man in a sharp navy pinstripe suit. He looked expensive. He looked corporate. "Mr. Bennett," the man said smoothly. "My name is Arthur Pendleton. I represent a private equity firm." "I have no equity," Marcus grunted, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs chafed. "I have nothing. Go away. I'm not here for your money, Mr. Bennett. I'm here regarding your liabilities." Marcus froze. Liabilities? Pendleton opened a briefcase and pulled out a single document. It was a promissory note. The paper was creased and stained with coffee, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. It was Marcus's signature. It was the debt note to the Petrovich brothers. $500,000 plus interest. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. You're with them. You're with the Russians." He lowered his voice to a frantic whisper. "Look, I can't pay. I'm in here. Tell them to give me time. I'll appeal. I'll get out." Pendleton smiled a thin, humorless expression. "Relax, Mr. Bennett. I am not with the Petrovic Syndicate. In fact, the Petrovic brothers no longer hold this note." "What?" "Debt is a commodity, Marcus. Just like stocks or bonds. It can be bought and sold. Distressed assets are a booming market." Pendleton tapped the glass. 3 weeks ago, the Petrovic organization came under federal investigation. They needed to liquidate assets quickly to pay for legal defense and hide their money. They sold off their debt portfolio for pennies on the dollar to a blind trust. Marcus blinked his brain, trying to catch up. "So, I don't owe the mob anymore." "Correct. You no longer owe the Russian mafia a single cent. Your life is not in danger from them." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made Marcus vomit washed over him. He slumped against the glass, laughing hysterically. Tears streamed down his face. Oh my God, I'm safe. I'm not going to die." "I wouldn't celebrate just yet," Pendleton said softly. Marcus stopped laughing. "Why, who bought the debt? Who do I owe now?" Pendleton turned the document over. On the back, stamped in red ink, was the seal of the new owner. "Acquisition completed, Stratford Holdings." Marcus stared at the stamp. The world stopped. Stratford Holdings. Clara. My client, Pendleton, said, enjoying the look of absolute horror on Marcus's face, "purchased your debt. She now owns the rights to collect. However, since you are incarcerated and insolvent, she has decided to structure a repayment plan." "Repayment plan," Marcus whispered. "Yes. You see, under the terms of the original loan, which were quite draconian, defaulting on payment allows the creditor to seize all future assets and garnish all wages at 100% until the interest is paid. The interest rate is 25% weekly." "That's illegal," Marcus shouted. "It's a loan shark contract, Marcus. You signed it. And since you signed the divorce settlement, waiving your right to contest financial disputes, it stands." Pendleton leaned in close to the glass. "Clara doesn't want money. She knows you can't pay $500,000. She wants your commissary." "What?" "She has obtained a court order garnishing your prison wages. The 8 cents an hour you make folding laundry, it goes to her. The money your mother might try to send you for toothpaste or ramen noodles, it goes to her. Any money that enters your inmate account will be immediately transferred to Stratford Holdings to pay down the interest." Marcus stared at him, his mouth open. She's taking my soap money. She's a billionaire. Why would she do this?" "Because she can," Pendleton said, packing up his briefcase. "She wants you to know that she didn't just divorce you, Marcus. She owns you. Every hour you work in this prison, you are working for her. Every time you are hungry and can't buy a candy bar, it's because of her." Pendleton stood up and buttoned his jacket. "She sent a message, by the way." Marcus looked up, broken tears of frustration welling in his eyes. "What?" "She said to tell you that she finally agrees with you on one thing." "What's that?" "Business is war, and you lost." Pendleton walked out. Marcus sat in the booth alone. He looked at the grey walls. He thought about the next 12 years. 12 years of folding sheets. 12 years of bland oatmeal. 12 years of knowing that the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had cheated on, the woman he had called boring, was somewhere out there, sitting in a glass tower, watching his balance hit zero every single week. He wasn't just a prisoner of the state. He was a prisoner of Clara Sterling. And that was a sentence with no parole. The steel gates of FCI Sheridan buzzed open, spitting Marcus Bennett back into a world he no longer recognized. 12 years of prison had stripped the arrogance from his spine. At 54, he was a ghost in thrift store clothes, holding a plastic bag containing $40 and a bus ticket. He arrived in downtown Seattle under a gray drizzle. The skyline was dominated by a new monolith, a twisting spire of white glass piercing the clouds. Blazing at the top in holographic letters that could be seen for miles was one word: Sterling. Clara hadn't just survived, she had conquered the sky. Seeking warmth, Marcus ducked into a grime-streaked diner near the tracks. He ordered black coffee from a waitress whose face was etched with deep lines of bitterness. As she slammed the mug down, Marcus froze. It was Sienna. The former marketing star was now wiping grease off tables, her career obliterated by the blacklist Clara had orchestrated. "Don't speak to me," Sienna hissed, seeing his recognition. "I live in a studio apartment owned by a Sterling subsidiary. I pay her rent every month. She won Marcus. She owns the whole damn city." Marcus sat in silence, the truth settling like lead in his stomach. Above the counter, a news program flashed, Titan of the Year, Clara Sterling. On the screen, Clara looked radiant, cleaner and sharper than she ever was as his wife. She sat with the grace of a queen. The interviewer leaned in his voice, echoing in the quiet diner. "Clara, sources say your ex-husband is released today. Do you have any words for him?" The diner went quiet. Clara paused, looking down at her platinum signet ring. Then she looked back at the camera with a serene, terrifying indifference. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Who?" The interviewer laughed nervously, moving on to the next topic. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. She hadn't just defeated him, she had deleted him. He was the villain of a story she had long since finished writing. Leaving his coffee untouched, Marcus turned up his collar against the cold. He walked out into the rain, disappearing into the shadows of a city built by the woman he once called boring. And that is the story of Marcus Bennett and Clara Sterling. It's a brutal reminder that you should never mistake silence for ignorance. Marcus thought he was playing chess while his wife was just knitting in the corner, but he didn't realize that she owned the board, the pieces, and the table they were playing on. He lost everything: his money, his freedom, and eventually his very identity, because he underestimated the person closest to him. It's a lesson in humility, integrity, and the terrifying power of a woman who has been pushed too far. What do you think? Did Clara go too far with the prison debt, or did Marcus get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma and corporate revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for listening. And remember, be careful who you step on today, because they might be the one signing your paycheck tomorrow. See you in the next video.